Breaking Bad is one of the greatest, if not the greatest TV show ever made. As a matter of fact, Breaking Bad is so good that it didn't just give us some of the greatest TV protagonists ever written, it may have accidentally ruined television protagonists forever. Not because Walter White was extremely dark or different or more shocking than other characters written, but because the writing behind him was so precise, so deliberate, and so carefully constructed that it set a standard that most television simply can't match. And after Breaking Bad, whenever new TV shows came out, it set an expectation and a standard of near perfection, and very few TV shows were ever able to live up to that. Before Breaking Bad ever even aired, the creator of the show, Vince Gilligan, talked about the show briefly, and he described it using a very simple idea. He wanted to turn Mr. Chips into Scarface, and that one sentence defined the entire series. Walter White wasn't just a character reacting to events, he was a character designed to transform, and that might sound simple, but in television, it's actually incredibly rare to do that perfectly over the course of its entire runtime. Most TV protagonists are written to remain relatively stable. They grow a little bit, they learn lessons along the way, but fundamentally they stay the same person season after season, usually developing the most and changing the most by the end or the last season of the show. But Breaking Bad was built around the opposite idea, and that is that the protagonist would change completely, and every season would push him or her further down that path. And that kind of storytelling requires planning, discipline, and patience, because if even one step into that transformation feels unearned or inauthentic, the entire character falls apart, and Breaking Bad never lets that happen. And this is for all of their incredibly well-written protagonists. This doesn't just pertain to Walter White, but for most of the video, I'll mostly kind of reflect back to him because he is technically the main protagonist, maybe even taking a slight step up above Jesse Pinkman, just based on screen time and who we met in the beginning of the show. But one of the reasons that Walter White feels so believable is that his transformation doesn't happen all at once, it happens slowly, and that is painfully slowly. At first, Walter feels sympathetic. He's just an underpaid, overqualified teacher who's ignored by his students and disrespected at his second job. And when he's diagnosed with cancer, the audience understands why he feels so desperate. Now, that doesn't excuse his actions at the beginning of the show that sets him down this path by any way, but when he starts to cook meth, the show frames it as a tragic decision, something he feels forced into. But season by season, that justification begins to fade, and Walter starts making decisions that aren't about survival anymore. They're about pride and control and power. And the genius of Breaking Bad is that the audience often realizes this at the same time that Walter does. By the time he fully embraces Heisenberg, he transforms completely, and it feels completely earned. Walt has sympathetic moments even after he starts to become really the villain of the show in a way, but for the most part, that ego and that desire to be in control and to have power, those were seeds that were planted at the beginning of the show, before he ever started cooking meth, before he ever started laying down beakers onto pipes and putting fucking Sudafed into them. It's just that that ego is elevated and it is risen and it's at a boiling point. But another reason why Breaking Bad's characters work so well is that the writing never talks down to the audience. The show rarely explains its themes directly, and instead it lets the story reveal them. If you look at Walter and Jesse's relationship, on paper, Jesse starts as a sidekick, but over time their dynamic becomes one of the emotional cores of the entire show, one of the main principles. Walter manipulates him and uses him, and he also protects him and sometimes genuinely cares about him. Those contradictions are never really neatly explained in the show, they just simply exist, and that complexity makes the characters feel more human than most television protagonists do. Breaking Bad trusted viewers to interpret those moments by themselves, and that trust made the storytelling far more powerful. As Walter starts to go down his darker path, he starts to use Jesse a little bit more, and he starts to threaten him a little bit more, and even the multiple parts in the show that they start to break apart and hate each other, even at Walter's darkest moments later in the show, he genuinely has times and story beats where you can see that he actually deeply cares for Jesse Pinkman. It's another moment and thing where you can kind of pull apart and dissect and see that just because Heisenberg is alive and well and at his most powerful, that doesn't mean that Walter White, the man that we knew before, is dead and buried. But the real secret behind Walter White isn't just about Walter, it's about the characters around him. Breaking Bad is filled with supporting characters who feel just as layered as the protagonist. Jesse Pinkman evolves from a comic relief into one of the most emotionally complex characters in the show and is really, like I said, on that same pedestal as Walter White whenever you're looking at the main characters of the show. He is just as important, he is just as iconic. Hank Schrader starts as a loud, confident DEA agent but slowly reveals deep vulnerability and determination. Skylar White becomes one of the most controversial characters in television history because she reacts to Walter's heinous actions in painfully realistic ways that is so baffling that people actually hate her character because she's doing things and responding to things in ways that make sense.
They're sending agents to our house right now to guard us. God! When is this going to end?
But then there's an interesting character in the Breaking Bad storyline, and that is Gus Fring, a villain so calm, calculated, and controlled that he becomes one of the most iconic antagonists in television history, but perfectly mirrors Walter White. But all these characters, and there's so many more that I didn't even mention, including Mike, that don't just support Walter's story, they challenge it, and every interaction pushes Walter further towards becoming Heisenberg. That level of character depth is incredibly difficult to maintain across multiple seasons, but somehow Vince Gilligan and the team behind Breaking Bad found a way to do it flawlessly. Another thing that Breaking Bad does incredibly well is that it fully paints out the consequences of these actions. Many television shows allow protagonists to make dangerous and unethical choices without lasting impact, but Breaking Bad never really does. Every decision Walter makes creates ripple effects and people get hurt, relationships collapse, and trust disappears, but the show constantly reminds the audience that Walter's rise to power comes at a cost. Now this cost, these consequences, it makes the story feel more grounded into reality, but even when the plot becomes intense or dramatic, the emotional consequences remain believable. That commitment to realism is one of the reasons why Walter White feels like such a complete character. After Breaking Bad, many shows tried to recreate this success of character development. And of course, why wouldn't you? Some of them succeeded, but very few were able to recreate the same level of precision. One of the shows that comes to mind just off the top of my head is Franklin Saint's development in the show Snowfall. As good as Snowfall was, it didn't exactly stick the landing with a lot of people. Now, I thought it was perfectly done for that character. I think that's probably an unpopular opinion, but maybe that's another show we'll talk about in the future. But like I said, very few were able to recreate the same level of character development with this kind of precision because complexity alone isn't what made Walter White work. It was structure, his story has direction, momentum, purpose. Nothing felt random, nothing felt like filler. Every decision moved the character closer to his final form. That kind of long-term storytelling is extremely difficult in television, where shows often evolve unpredictability based on ratings and network decisions, but Breaking Bad managed to stay focused on its central transformation from beginning to end. And that focus is what made Walter White so unforgettable. That focus, that type of storytelling is what made Breaking Bad stick around for so long and made it so fantastic. It wasn't about the ratings, it wasn't about what the director was doing at that time, it wasn't about future projects. These external factors are what made shows that were competing with Breaking Bad at the time, like, I don't know, The Walking Dead or Dexter or even Game of Thrones, they all died a similar death while Breaking Bad didn't. But in the end, Breaking Bad didn't just ruin television protagonists because it was darker. It ruined them because it showed just how powerful character writing could be. Walter White wasn't just a great anti-hero, he was the result of careful planning, incredible performances, and some of the most disciplined storytelling television has ever seen. And once audiences experience this type of writing, it changes expectations. These standards get exponentially higher. So now when we watch a new show, we look for characters who evolve, characters who feel layered, characters whose choices matter. And in a good way, that's the legacy of Breaking Bad. It didn't just create one of the greatest protagonists in television history, it raised the bar for every protagonist that came after, even if very few have been able to reach it. Let me know what you think about Breaking Bad in the comments below. Do you think it is probably the greatest television show ever? I certainly do. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Like I said, please leave a comment below. All those things very much help. I'm very, very excited for the videos that we make in the future, and I appreciate all the love that we've gotten in the channel in the last couple months. You guys have no idea. But so you can see all the fun things that we do in the future, make sure you click subscribe. Make sure you click the funny little notification bell and make sure it goes ding or whatever sound it makes. If it does make sounds whenever you click it, I'm not 100% sure. But anyways, I will see you guys in the next one. Peace, love, adios, and goodbye.